IVM.
I have a confession to make. I own too many headphones. Like literally, one for every occasion or any occasion I can make up to buy one. That's because I listen to music all day long. It's my thing. When I look around, I see everyone else is plugged in too. With earphones, headphones, of all kinds. Expensive, the free stuff that you get with your mobile phone, blah, blah, blah. And that makes me wonder, what are they listening to? Is it just music? Or is there a whole other medium which is being growing and expanding on us while we focus on the poster child of content that is video? I'm talking about audio. And when we talk about audio, we tend to focus on the Spotifys and the Apple Musics of the world, right? The global ones. But when you look at it a little closer, you realize there's another local global player, which is JioSaavn. And JioSaavn's always been an interesting platform for me to look at. Mainly because I've seen them as a platform over the years pivot and make moves which always seem to make sense. And always seem to be looking at being ahead of the proverbial curve. And where they stand now with the recent partnership with Jio, it's not just an audio game anymore. It's a whole new playing field. Although I do feel it's always going to be music at their core. And that being said, this also is going to disrupt this entire space. And as disruption and this mystery box of advertising dying seems to be what our show is about, I'm super excited to have Vinodh Bhat, co-founder, president and chief strategy officer at JioSaavn on the show today. A man who flies between the States and India every 6 weeks like it's a fast train from Virar. I'm Varun Duggirala, co-founder and content chief at The Glitch, and this is Advertising is Dead. We'll catch you guys after this break.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another great week on IVM Podcast. If you aren't following us on social media, please make sure you do. We're IVM Podcast on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. If you guys want to catch Cyrus's rant on Cyrus Says Live, you can definitely check out Instagram. We kind of publish that live every time we're doing it on Tuesday afternoons. Make sure you check in for that. On Cyrus this week, actually, we had a really great guest, Roshan Abbas. Roshan talks about a wonderful career spanning radio, TV, live events, entrepreneurship, and now he's an author too. It's full of funny stories, and I think you guys will really enjoy it. On Simplify, Chuck, Naren, and Shrikant simplify the central banks and RBI, how they work, and why they've been making the news off late. On the 99th episode of The Seen and the Unseen, Amit is joined by lawyer and policy analyst Ameya Naik. They talk about the rules and institutions that keep populist readers in check and how they are being meddled with. On Vartalab, Akash and Naveen have a fun and insightful chat with Nikhil Uduppa and Himanshu Vaswani. They're the founders of 4x4 Experiences and have created Control-Alt-Delete, India's largest crowdsourced live music gathering. On the first 3 episodes of The Habit Coach, Ashton talks about dopamine, fidgeting, and melatonin. Episodes are out every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Give it a listen to improve your habits. On Football Twaddle, the boys discuss Chelsea beating Manchester City, the Raheem Sterling incident, and the Aubameyang incident. On Geek Fruit, Dinkar and Jishnu get into the holiday spirit by discussing the best Christmas movies of all time and their favorite Christmas songs. And with that, on with your shows.
Welcome to Advertising is Dead. I'm Varun Duggirala, co-founder and content chief at The Glitch. And today I have Vin, or Vinodh Bhat, as he's actually called, co-founder, president, and chief strategy officer at JioSaavn. I think we're just going to stick to Vin for this conversation. I don't think that's a lot of designation for this conversation.
Easy enough.
Yeah. And I want to start with the most important question, because I know this, and I think most people will find this exciting to hear. What does Saavn really stand for? I think that was the first conversation we ever had. And when you told me that story, I was like, 1 second, this is something that everyone should hear.
Yeah. So it's a great way to start off, actually, because we struggled for years to come up with a name for what we were doing. And, we wanted to make sure that we had a URL that anytime somebody typed that into Google, we'd be the only result that came up. Mm-hmm. And so we quickly learned that all the 4-letter URLs were taken. And just through like random brainstorming sessions, one of our staff members came up with Saavn.
Okay.
And you had no idea that, there's a Hindi word that's similar to it.
What?
Yeah, no clue. And after we just started iterating a bit, we realized that it stood for South Asian Audiovisual Network. Right. So just like my title, it's kind of a mouthful. So we never really say that.
Yeah.
But that's what it really means.
And that's the best way to go backwards, right? You find the name and then you figure out what each of the, alphabet stands for.
Yeah. It's not like we started out with this longer thing and then coming up with the acronym. We had the acronym first and then filled it with the appropriate words.
But then also, I think your focus has always been the South Asian market, right? I think if I go way back, and I think if I want to call it the origin story of Saavn per se, can you just talk about how that kind of started off?
Yeah, I mean, it's quite a long and winding road that we have taken to get here. The first origin of this go back to 2005. And, for music, it's been something that's been a very integral part of my life. My co-founders, Rishi and Param, too as well. Growing up, I mean, music was on my household all the time. Even to this day, my parents are very much into karaoke. Singing and dancing was just like, a very big part of growing up. Now, for me as an actual musician, I'm terrible. I tried, piano, guitar, bunch of different things. I didn't have the ear for it, but I just love it. And I found that the way that I grew up, now I'm seeing my kids grow up the same way. But we really started the company, first because like my mom in Texas, she was about an hour away from a lot of the Indian stores where they could buy like CDs and DVDs. And, we decided to at the time, build a video on demand service that could actually bring a lot of those movies from India right in their own homes. And so it quickly went from movies on demand to music on iTunes, which became a decent sized business for us. And then in around 2008, 2009, things got a little frustrating for us internally because we were so bullish and so excited about this opportunity to serve South Asians globally.
Yeah.
What we found is that a lot of our partners, it was like, iTunes and Time Warner Cable and about 60 other distribution partners shared the enthusiasm because we were excited about it. But when it came to like getting their entire organizations aligned around what we were doing to serve South Asians, it didn't make sense, because the markets outside of India at the time, each, like the US has about 5 million South Asians,
True.
Canada has around 3 million, the UK has around 4.5 million. And so those were not like mass market numbers. And so the investment didn't necessarily follow. And then to get very specific, for iTunes, for instance, like whenever you actually searched for an Indian artist, I mean, there's different ways in which you can spell an artist, right? So like if you didn't spell it exactly the way, you weren't getting any results, right? When it came to categorization, I mean, you think about like all the different genres, all the different languages, right? There wasn't necessarily like the resources on their side to be able to invest to the nuance level that we needed.
I think that problem still exists. I think across any most global platforms, that's still a problem.
Yeah, that's still like a legacy problem that I don't think is really going to change. But I think the final thing was the fact that a lot of these services, like at the time, keep in mind it's 2008, 2009. They had no plans to really get into India. I mean, they said yes eventually, but we can't necessarily give you a timetable. And so we said, all right. Param, Rishi, and myself said, like, we need to get a little bit more serious around this. And that's when we decided to invest pretty heavily in kind of morphing the company into just being from pure media to media and tech. And brought on, through acquisition, through hiring, a bunch of really talented people in product and in engineering, and pivoted the entire company to direct-to-consumer. So we launched the website, the applications, and got up to 20 plus million users before this landmark transaction with Reliance and Jio.
Yeah, and congratulations on that. And
Thank you.
And I think it's an interesting time to have this chat. It kind of the entire journey kind of has come to this point. And what is also interesting is the fact that you guys are South Asians who almost had an outside in into the market, if I want to call it that. You're not an inside out. And while all global brands kind of come in from, let's say, from the States or from Scandinavia, from across the board, you guys pretty much based out of India, but kind of built the platform over here. And which is interesting because you have local insight, yet you have global understanding, right? I think now whenever I look at the app myself and I consume, I think a lot of the Indian music I consume actually is a lot more on JioSaavn. I go around the place and I consume across the board. But I find the fact that especially the Indian music curation is actually the strongest I found with you guys. And I think that, I guess that comes from this curation aspect.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Would you call yourself a technology company? Would you think you're more a media slash...
I would call us a technology company that's in the business of media.
Yeah.
Because like it really comes down to fundamentally solving problems for the industry and for everyday people, right? And so we saw that the reason that so many people were on, pirate websites was because there wasn't anything available to them that was free, that was compelling for them to, to actually consume, that gave them choice, that gave them convenience, that gave them control. Then we realized there's just like even more fundamental problems to address, like telcos were trying to get consumers to adopt data, and they needed to come up with great use cases. You know, at the time, Android was also rolling out, and I think a lot of manufacturers found difficulty in just trying to get consumers to embrace Android. They needed to come up with really compelling use cases. You know, advertisers as well, I think, have been pretty excited about music since the very beginning. But anytime you hear the word piracy, you think, twice, 3 times, 100 times before you actually make a move in working with brands. And so when you think about all that constellation of problems that you have to solve, I mean, it's very exciting for us to actually come up with different solutions for those. And for us to do that the right way, I think you have to come from a product and technical mindset. Yeah. And that doesn't necessarily mean, I mean, the largest group at our company out of 200 employees is engineering. Mm-hmm. But it's also a mindset on how you can address problems that can exist even in non-technical roles too, whether that's the way we create content, that's the way that we market, or the way that we even manage, audience experience, for example.
So freemium is always an interesting thing to look at, right? And when I look at the two models, I would say maybe JioSaavn has there is the freemium model and there's the pro model. Freemium is straightforward for brands, and I'm talking primarily from an advertising brand content standpoint. It's pretty much saying what are you building up to go between what you're listening to, which has been the traditional way. I mean, we've consumed television that way. We've done everything that way for years. But I think the last decades really changed how we consume stuff, and I think that's where the pro aspect really comes in, right? So if I was a brand and going by the last decade, I think there's been an evolution of how brands, creators, and marketers kind of look at how the word branded content, as broad a term as that can be, and can mean so many things right now. Right. How they look at that from I think everyone understands how to look at that from a video sense, but how do they look at that from an audio sense? I think it's still a gray area for most of them. Like, I know I've had these conversations many times with brands, and I think with audio, they kind of get a little stuck in terms of saying, okay, what more can we do? Yeah. At lowest case understanding, they'll say jingle. Yep. And highest case understanding, they might actually go to saying, can we do something that is almost bespoke for our brand? Right. How have you seen that evolve? Yeah, that's a great question. We have gone through an interesting journey with working with brands too as well. Because you're right, I think everybody's like very focused on video and display. But what we found too is that as much as like the phone is lit when people are consuming visual media, there's so many cases in which people are putting their phones in their pockets and plugging in their headphones when they're commuting, when they're exercising, walking, when they're at work. And audio is very much a companion medium that way. If you look at some of the recent Nielsen stats, on-demand audio consumption is more than double on-demand video consumption in all markets, and growing at a almost a triple-digit pace. Yeah, everyone's got headphones on. Exactly. Yeah. And so like our journey in working with these advertisers is interesting because none of us came from a media ad sales background. So we just kind of dove into this in like 2011, 2012. Plugged into like, a bunch of display ad networks, and like our users just were livid because they were getting all kinds of random ads, things flying across the screen, because we didn't necessarily know this, how this whole system worked aside from just plugging into what was already there. So we quickly stripped that out. Then we launched a new innovation where we would do something where we'd only work with one brand every day. Okay. So like people get into the app, they see like, Head and Shoulders, Western Union, or Micromax, back in the day. And that led to this opposite problem of like fatigue, where people were just annoyed by just seeing the same advertiser over and over again, right? And we didn't have audio at the time. And it wasn't until 2015 or so that we kind of dawned on us, it's kind of very simple now in hindsight, that we needed to develop advertising in the form and function of the experience on JioSaavn. Right. And so that's where now we have this audio ad that is served up every 15 minutes or so. And after the audio ad is done, there's 15 minutes of display, and the audio ad has a call to action to the display ad. Yeah. Right. And so that's worked out pretty well. We're the first ones in India to really do that. And the first one in the digital music and audio streaming industry to do it as well. And something that we're continuing to iterate on. So now, like, we've now worked with over, I'd say about 200 brands, Pepsi, Colgate, Amazon, OnePlus, tons of brands that are out there. And
now we're kind of thinking from a different mentality, and it's really around curation, creation, and collaboration. And I'll run through a couple of examples, right? So when it comes to curation, like Bira is one of the great partners that we have, and I'm sure we're all.
I've seen the hip hop playlists and stuff like that.
Yeah. So like they basically made a pretty big bet on hip hop. Encore is pretty passionate about hip hop as a genre, and we went to like this 40 million song library that we have, and basically curated through our editors, through our algorithm, and came up with all these different channels that allowed people who were very passionate about hip hop to actually like embrace it. It wasn't something that was really supported in the market at the time. And Beer has done some amazing things from their brand side, operationally their execution too as well, and we've helped them just continue to amplify that, and now helped make them synonymous with hip hop in the country. So that's worked pretty well when you look at the traditional metrics of like awareness and likely to purchase, likely to recommend, and what have you. From a creation perspective, our team has had a great time working with Wavemaker and Netflix. And there was a series of podcasts that were created. If I back up for a second and think about the business problem, I mean, you guys know pretty well as having Netflix as a client that it's a pretty high price point, and it's really hard to tease out what exactly is behind that paywall. So for Wild Wild Country, there was a bunch of podcasts that were created that just allowed people to just understand what was actually available. When you look at the funnel of like the entire internet population, then people have smartphones, people have data connections, and people are listening to music, then people are listening to podcasts. Like those are the individuals who are very likely to actually wind up subscribing. And so I think we had about 2 million people that wound up consuming this content, and they're kind of in various stages of a journey to become ultimately subscribers of Netflix.
How are you seeing the podcasting economy go? I'm also asking this. I have an ulterior motive on this because, as you know, we are on a podcast now.
Yeah.
And for me, it's a new medium. I mean, it was a medium I got to know 9 months back. And one of the initial questions was, how does someone? And I think when you've been running a business long enough, the first question is, okay, how does this make money?
Yeah.
Right. And also the fact is that I think the West has taken to podcasts in a different way from how India is.
Right.
And I guess in a lot of ways they are different markets, especially for us for audio. How do you see the podcasting space evolve? I mean, from the Indian as well as the global perspective.
Yeah, I think it's there's been a lot of advancement over the last few years, but it's still early days. And a lot of this is in response to consumers and their behavior and some of their unarticulated or unmet needs. We're seeing a lot of interesting work in categories like comedy, entertainment, sports, and history. And what we found, particularly in India, is that because of bandwidth constraints, there wasn't really much of a podcasting, or I should say, long-form audio content ecosystem, especially on radio, right? Yeah. And so now if you're able to, deliver longer-form audio on smartphones within JioSaavn, you're able to essentially deliver an infinite dial, right? So whether you have like 10,000 listeners or 10 million listeners, you can give all that content an equal playing field. Now, brands are going to be in various stages of their interest. I mean, some brands would be interested in a very small audience if it's the exact right audience, and some of them will look at more scale opportunities if it's more about just tonnage and awareness. So we're pretty excited by it. We've done some great works with some of the examples I was giving you before, and I think brands are coming at it with the right mentality. Right? They're not like expecting some people to immediately buy something from hearing a podcast, right? It's really like it's a highly targeted, self-selecting audience. And when you're listening to content that you truly want to listen to, it creates this like so-called theater of the mind, right? Where when those brand messages are delivered to you, before or after or as a mid-roll, these are things that are actually you're going to remember. They're actually going to sink into your mind, and when it is appropriate to be in this mindset of wanting to transact, people will follow through. I
think like the seamlessness is what's important. Right?
Yeah.
If anything feels like an ad, then I think we're all mentally in tune to to switch off partially, if not fully in some cases.
Yeah.
But if it feels seamless with the entire narrative of things, and I think that goes for any medium, be it video, be it audio, etc.
Yeah.
I think as we seeing the consumer evolve, I think the consumer has gotten smarter.
Yeah.
The consumer also enjoys a good ad. Sometimes the ad is great, and you listen to it, you'll watch it again. And speaking of watch, is the JioSaavn model going to evolve to the Apple Music model of saying audio plus video, or are you seeing this as primarily an audio platform like a Spotify? So I think that's the question some people have asked you, I think, a million times.
Yeah.
I'm asking the question again.
It's
the obvious question.
It's inevitable. I mean, even when you think about the first question you asked me in our name, I mean, video is part of our DNA, right? So video will be very much a part of the offering.
Yeah.
But when we think about just a premium offering, it just really just comes down to the basics of like subscription economics, right? You have to, in order to get people to subscribe, you have to create something that is so compelling that is like 10 times more valuable to them than what they're actually paying for it, right? And so now that we have completed this integration with Jio, it's like, not even a week old. Now, like, the gears are really starting to turn on what that offering is going to be behind the paywall, above and beyond what it is right now. Part of that is indeed going to involve video. Part of it's just like we feel there's other aspects of this experience that, based on feedback that we get, based on speaking with consumers, really understanding their unarticulated needs, that we're going to create more services around the experience of music that we think that it'll be worth subscribing for. But we will always be a freemium model. There will always be a free service here because, like, I think more
so...
so...
the Indian market, actually. I think.
I think it works really well, I
think we as Indians like to sample it first and then make sure it's fine and then go ahead and I think that sentiment won't go away anytime. You spoke about curation and creation. I know there was a third one, which we digressed to podcast, and I think can talk about the third one.
That was collaboration, right? And so that's where... we work with a lot of really talented individuals and groups, and we align them with brands. So I'll give you an example. This was with Anupama Chopra and Rajiv Masan, and they have a show on JioSaavn called Take Two. Yeah. And it's if you haven't had a chance to listen to it, I highly recommend it. It's they'll interview people like Ranveer Singh or Amir Khan or Irfan Khan, and it's not about promoting their next project, right? It is like having just a light yet serious discussion on, motivation, the why, the how, like some of the details of, a lot of their journeys, how they got to where they are and what their outlook is. And, we happen to pair that up as a collaborator with Emirates, because Emirates at the time, and they're still, promoting a lot of their routes. They wanted to differentiate versus the other airlines out there. And two of those mechanisms were... one was the food, right, that they served up. And so there's, little we could really do there. The second was the entertainment system. And so you think about the content of what Anupama and Rajiv are really speaking about in the interviews that they're conducting. People that are very interested in entertainment, when they are traveling long distances, are going to make sure that they want to have, a great set of entertainment options on there, right? So it was a really nice hand-in-glove fit. The other aspect of that was that Emirates actually helped us promote the show. And so there was like, social media campaigns, there was traditional media campaigns just to kind of, understand that podcasting is such an early medium that they were bringing new listeners to the ecosystem. So
when you talk about campaigns, I think I want to go back a step and look at it from the larger perspective. I think most times when you look at audio only pieces, I think everyone tries to compare it to radio, right? But from what we're talking about here, this is more a mainstream media network than it is what a radio station is, in terms of the fact that the different shows would ideally have their own campaigns, would have multiple layers of video plus audio and different ways to monetize and different ways for brands to be a part of it. When I look at how this can expand, the opportunities seem endless. How do you see brands understanding this better? And I'm going back to that because I think one of the core parts about what we're trying to do on the show is make people understand different opportunities they have in the marketing and advertising space today than they did 10 years ago. Right. I think 10 years ago, life was a lot simpler. Yeah. Thankfully, it's not as simple now for a lot of us. Yeah. Present party included. But if you look at how that's expanding, if I was a brand today, and I would walk in and say, okay, what can I do in audio? I know it kind of overlaps with what maybe we spoke about a little earlier, but if I just walked in today and said, I want to figure out what all I can do, and there are the 3 buckets, but what's my starter kit? What's my, how do I scale from there?
Right.
And what kind of investments do I really need to make if there are numbers I want to put out there?
Yeah.
What would that be?
Yeah. So I think digital music streaming and audio broadly is it's a way to access youth, right? Because if you think about most of the consumers that we have, they're in that 18 to 34 bucket. A lot of these young people are, professionals. They're on the go. Music is a very big part of their lives, and they are making decisions about brands that they're going to be loyal to for the rest of their lives.
True.
Right? And so if you can reach them early at this point of passion, the likelihood that they're going to be favoring your brand is way higher, you know?
Yeah.
So the 101, the basic is this native impact spot that we've developed, like I was referring to earlier, 15 minutes of listening time, 100% share of voice. It's an audio and display component to it. But, to a point we were talking about earlier, the key is how do you make that feel more like content?
Yeah.
Right? Where it's relevant, it's useful, it's timely. And that's where the data that we have. I mean, when you look at the 9 trillion data points that we've collected since inception, we can really create a mosaic of the consumer, right? Where we can tell what their personality traits are. We can tell like when they're commuting, when they're at the office, when they're going out to lunch, when they're going to sleep, when they're hanging out with friends. Yeah. All just based on their streaming patterns. And so part of this is like understanding who the customer is. Part of it is like figuring out, okay, through the right targeting cohorts, how can we actually create something where the advertising actually is welcomed as opposed to something like that really turns people off. And so we're doing some really innovative work with an unnamed e-commerce company where we're able to kind of, match up consumers, based on, their consumer base and ours, and serve up advertising to them that is, what the AI and ML will say they will likely buy next. And not only is that something, it's not something like retargeting. It's not something like you put like something in your shopping cart and follows you, creepily around the web. It's just more like it's a strong version of recommendations, right? The challenge, of course, becomes like if we're serving up audio ads, and at best in our 2 studios in Mumbai, we can create like 10, 12 audio ads in a day. And that's where everybody's really pissed if we do that because it really takes a lot of time and energy to do. But if we're talking about serving, millions of audio ads every day, you need some really creative technology to go text-to-speech, which we have actually done in-house. So that's like kind of some of the more advanced work that we're doing that, that not all marketers are created equal. Some, embrace tech more than others. And for the ones that are more, product and tech oriented, we're able to do this type of work. But eventually we see a world where, everyone will have access to it. There just so happens to be some early adopters.
I think tracking consumer data and using that has a bad name. I think it's unnecessary. We have more personalized content to access than we ever did. We never have. Like, I shudder to think about using that remote control to switch between channels to figure out what to watch, because I don't think I've done that in a couple of years now. And going back to this is every brand either focuses on 2 things, right? Propagating their values, which is what all the pieces that are already happening help with. Like, find content that connects to your values, connects to what you want to say, etc. But what you just spoke of in terms of e-commerce is also kind of giving the consumer value, right? You can actually buy this piece for the brand as well as consumer. You can actually buy something that relates to you, connects to you, and that again becomes part of unobtrusive advertising. And I think coming back to that point of saying seamlessness and variety. And you talk about variety, there are 2 kinds, especially in the space that you guys occupy. There is the for lack of a better way to bucket them, there's the filmy content and there's the non-filmy content in India. How do you? I know there's a balance that needs to be struck. I know you've done artist originals,
right?
And you continue to do that. There's the other part, which is, let's say, the property you do with Neha Dhupia, and there's Take Two, and so on and so forth. How do you see that skew, and what do you see being a larger focus area, and what do you see growing more faster in the short term as well as the long term?
Yeah, well, I think the podcasting effort under JioSaavn, original JioSaavn OG, then, AO is an artist development platform. There's JioSaavn, the mothership. There will be, future initiatives, new initiatives too as well.
Yeah.
And that's a testament to the very entrepreneurial culture that we have. There's around 200 employees we have across 5 offices. We'll probably double the size of the company over the next 18 to 24 months, working closely with Jio and Reliance. But in order for us to continue to drive that spirit of entrepreneurship, there needs to be these new brands that are created even in-house, right? And so we're not doing it for the sake of doing it, but if there's genuinely a new initiative that we see, whether it's a new imprint or a new agency or a new, way of doing something, we will evaluate whether we should, launch something in-house and put a team around it, either with veterans on the JioSaavn team or some new people that we recruit around it, So AO is very exciting because I think, we all know that this is really driven by the film industry, right?
Yeah.
We've got a lot of great relationships among the film producers, all the record labels. I mean, it is, the bread and butter, right? And we'll always continue to go and support that. But we also see a lot of really incredible artists across different genres, not just in India, but in New York and Toronto and London and the Bay Area that will never see the light of day. Well, I shouldn't say they will never get the support that they truly deserve.
That kind of scale, right?
Especially on mainstream Western platforms, and so that's where we've really embraced them, and we're able to kind of look at data to see how some of their music's actually doing, how similar music's actually doing, and then even use recommendations to be able to help them take flight, right? So once they actually become part of JioSaavn, we're able to make sure that people who would most enjoy the music that they're creating will be exposed to them. So we can really leverage the fact that we're a discovery platform,
Yeah, I think also artists kind of also are at an interesting point. Right? They're mainstream labels, and a lot of artists worry about working with mainstream labels, whether in India and globally, because they kind of feel that it dilutes what they really want to do.
Yeah.
I know Spotify has a model where artists can kind of launch themselves straight on Spotify, and although I'm not sure how much that has grown across the world, because I don't actually have that information. But how do you see that part of it growing? Do you see the fact that will there be no labels in the future? Would it be everyone can kind of just launch themselves and then be it a creator, be it a musician, be it an artist across the board, especially on platforms like yours?
I think labels will always have a very strong, place in this ecosystem. And I'm not just giving you the politically correct answer, right? I guess what I'm really trying to say is the fact that there are certain functions that a label serves. Now, is it called a label in the future? That I'm not sure of, right? But you need need artists.
Labels have a lot more value add to give now. I think that's what they're all learning.
Yeah. I mean, there's marketing support. There is touring. There is, merchandising. There's so many different values, right?
And most viewed YouTube channel in the world almost as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that kind of speaks.
That definitely helps, right? And so we think there always will be, a pretty strong place for all of them in the larger grand scheme of things,
Okay. At this point, I think I can see my producer telling me I need to go to break. So it's time that we take a break. We'll be right back with Advertising is Dead.
Family businesses get a bad rap. At one time, they were looked down on for getting rich, for being too ambitious. Today, they're still looked down on, but for not being ambitious enough. Not agile enough, not modern enough, too traditional in their mindset. The biggest brands and business houses in the country started out as humble family businesses. It's the way India has done business. Join Sonu Bhasin in conversation with stalwarts of Indian family businesses on the Inheritors podcast series by Bloomberg Quint. Discuss the highs and lows, the needs and pressure points of building a business legacy that spans generation.
Welcome back to Advertising is Dead. I'm Varun Duggirala, co-founder and content chief at The Glitch, and I'm with Vin.
Good to be back.
Yeah. How is the Jio piece happen? How did it happen? What's the outlook? Where is it going from here?
So it's an interesting story. Company's been around for a while as a consumer service, really, for about 7-8 years. And 2017 was an interesting year for us because we had raised plenty of capital from some phenomenal investors, Tiger Global, Liberty, Bertelsmann, Quillvest, a handful of others. All were very bullish, certainly on India and supportive of our team. But we realized that, based on Apple launching in the market, Spotify, planning to launch in the market, and then certain other domestic competitors, that we needed a strategic alignment with a larger company with significantly more resources. And so we kicked off a process. We got a lot of interest from some pretty sizable firms in the West Coast of the United States, and then a good amount of interest from firms in China. And then towards the end of our process, we were reconnected with the people at Reliance and Jio. Okay. And, we'd certainly been aware of what they were doing. But when we actually sat down at the table and really understood what they were doing, we were just absolutely blown away by the vision of what they were really thinking about for connectivity across India. And when you kind of back up and really think about it, there was a certain alignment that we saw, and it was mutual with the Jio management team, in that we were both coming from a technology mindset, right? Yeah. We thought that technology services allow the best of services to be accessible to everybody, right? And whether you're someone who's living in a city or if you're a farmer, you'll be able to have access to the best. Yeah. Then we also found that if you make something really easy to use and just simple and very intuitive, you can actually fundamentally change consumer habits. You can earn a position in people's daily life. Yeah. We both certainly agreed that music's one of the most powerful forms of entertainment ever created. I mean, it's what's unique about it. It's obvious is that it's a repeat use medium, right? You may watch a video once or a movie once, but music, your favorite, you're listening to over and over again.
That's so true.
And then one of the things that the Ambanis say is that data is the new oil, right? And we couldn't agree more in the sense that data allows you to come up with really interesting creatives, and data will allow you to also measure outcomes and the efficacy of your media spends. And so, we were just really kind of taken by the vision that they had laid out. Out of all the companies that we were talking to, they were the only ones that really thought about India first thing in the morning and the last thing before they went to sleep. It's a very, competitive organization in that they, want to go out there and win. And the scale at which they operate at is just tremendous.
Yeah, it's insane.
Right? And so we were looking for, a great partner. And I think it's a really strong hand-in-glove fit in that they have the scale and connectivity. We had very high engagement, really deep recurring use. And so the deal closed in April of 2018. Yeah. As of last week, we completed our integration where all of the Jio Music users are now migrated over onto JioSaavn. Yeah. And the new name of the brand is JioSaavn. Yeah. And we're excited because, advertisers are looking for reach, looking for frequency, they're looking for certain environments. We had about, 20 million-ish users, prior to the transaction. Yeah. We think well into next year that we'll cross, over 100 million users. And so I think we can go to brands with the same value proposition as a YouTube or a Facebook, but unique to kind of an audio medium.
Yeah. And if you look at it, India as an internet consumer base, right? We skipped the desktop and the laptop. We majority moved straight to the mobile phone. But with this integration, does it also mean that you'll go beyond the mobile phone? Like say that there are different platforms you can integrate JioSaavn across, beyond just how traditionally someone plugs in their phone and listens to JioSaavn. But is that going to expand now further?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So we have this vision of making JioSaavn ubiquitous, to make it available on speakers, smart devices, televisions, in car, and so now that this integration is completed, now it's a matter of really prioritizing, figuring out which of those areas that we want to really focus on, and deliver an experience that is compelling as using the regular app would be. Yeah. The first taste of this is really working with Amazon and Alexa, where we became the first service to integrate with them in the India market. That's gone exceptionally well. We see some really high usage numbers for people that use Alexa to use JioSaavn, and we expect that to continue.
And You spoke about YouTube as a comparison point, right, a little earlier. How do you see yourself working? How are you already working with creators? And how do you see yourself working with creators in time? Because that's actually, they're going to be a core part of growing this, right? One is the fact that what you would curate and what you would create. But a large part of it will also, I'm guessing at some point, if the plan is to expand, bring in a lot more creators per se who'd actually create their own content.
Yeah. So I think with video creators, like you have to do like a little bit of work, right? You need to get your sets, you need to get your, production right. I mean,
welcome to my world.
Yes. It doesn't have to be like, let's say, TV quality, but it needs to be at a certain level of standard if you want to get any kind of traction, right? Audio, you don't necessarily have that impediment. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that, anyone can be a musician or, a great podcast host, right? But the barrier for you to be able to get into the game, I think, is way less. Then now, when you add on the fact that you can use algorithms, you can make recommendations, you can help with curation, you can actually take somebody who is like a complete unknown and give them, great opportunity to be their own business, right? If we can get artists and podcasters that are not household names to actually be self-sustaining within a Saavn environment, very similar to some YouTubers that are very successful, we think that's a win. And so we've developed a lot of tools within our own marketplace that would allow that to happen. Okay.
And while talking about tools, right, I think on one side there's tools, on the other side there is trends, and we've spoken about data a lot in spurts through this entire conversation. And, when I've always looked at what Spotify does in terms of their advertising campaigns globally, where they actually use their data as their data actually is their advertising campaign in terms of what they do. What are the trends that you've noticed which might surprise people who would listen? Like, okay, or rather say like almost like, oh really kind of stuff, or stuff like, okay, but that actually makes sense. I put three broad, almost bizarre categories for you over there, but what kind of trends do you see?
Well, I can give you some of the historical data, and it's all going to change, and I'll tell you why. So historically, like 2014, 2015, I think our top song was like Chittiya Kalaya and like Baby Doll,
Yeah.
Then like in 16, the country got a little sad with Adil. And then out of nowhere, Ed Sheeran is like the number one track. And that's probably because, he performed, so he was very top of mind. And then this year, the number one song is Bomb Diggy. And the interesting thing about that is that it wasn't necessarily, tied to a label. It came through our AO, artist development platform.
I know. I've even seen the video with the entire Saavn crew dancing in the office to that song.
Yes, exactly. That so that was something where, pretty much the entire company got behind it. It was exciting. It was kind of, during wedding season, it was like all over and what have you. So I think like that really hit a nerve in a good way. And so we just saw, that interesting set of trends there. So we expect more of that to continue. From an artist level, like you can kind of tie artists and age together in the sense that like, there's very few artists that can transcend all age groups. And, by no surprise, Arjit Singh, Cindy Chauhan actually also follows, that similar pattern as well. But then everybody else, like, very few millennials are listening to Lata Mangeshkar or Kishore Kumar, that kind of stuff. The reason we think it's going to change significantly is that the synergies that we have with Jio will now take the scale to a whole different level.
Your audience expands.
Yeah. I mean, they already have 250 million paid subscribers. The My Jio app is like the home for, a lot of their customers. So we expect so many more customers now to come into Saavn. Then, touring, I think, will be pretty interesting now that we have like all this data. You overlay that on top of cities and, certain venues. You can kind of, program the country, right? By which artist should be in what venue when. And that's not only just like with Indian artists, it's also with American artists that are, looking at India more seriously now. And I think like us being based in New York and on the West Coast, I think we're a really great bridge to make that happen. And then lastly, I think like the e-commerce piece, or the commerce piece, I should say, like Reliance is actually the largest retailer in the country. Right? With their direct owned and operated stores as well as a lot of their joint ventures. And so we think there'll be a lot of new customers coming in from that funnel, both on the free side as well as even paid. So we think like all these different things that are coming into the pot are going to just change the data sets. And we're going to, next time we're having this conversation, there's probably going to be a new set of really interesting insights that I'll be able to share.
And even that the transition of when you spoke about the top songs, right? I think it shows from the fact that it's initially the party playlist option. You moved from that to at some point with Ed Sheeran, it's called cultural relevance of what's happening right now.
Yeah.
Interesting thing with Ed Sheeran is exactly around the time he came down, we worked with a brand of ours, Tresemme, and we created our own version of it, did an entire music video around the same song, right? Cultural relevance. And that I think that was peak at that point of time. And you're ending up with artist originals. Like it's actually that. What was your number one song was an original which you created. And
right.
So it's the time for creators to be a part of the larger audio ecosystem, and kind of grow there.
Yeah,
that data clearly shows that.
Right, and the traditional, if I can use that word, traditional Bollywood, right, Hindi, party types of songs. Like it's not like the streaming is going down. If anything, it's actually rocketing up.
Yeah.
The thing is, like the pace of English, the pace of some of the non Hindi film genre stuff is also increasing at such an electric pace that. All these categories are rising up. Just on a percentage share basis, it's, less than what it was before.
We've spoken about the journey of JioSaavn, right? We've spoken about how the entire audio landscape is, what brands need to do, what creators need to really do, where the whole industry is going. And I'm going to segue into this one piece from there to something we like to call humans of advertising.
Okay.
While you are a platform and a media company, I think you still are a human of advertising, because I think that's a strong part of what your model needs. This is basically where we don't talk about any of the stuff that is actually what you do. It's more about you as a person. It's a little random.
Okay.
And it's our version of the Coffee with Karan Rapid Quiz, just a little less random.
Okay.
What's the one song that's always on repeat on your playlist?
The one song on repeat. I listen to a lot of hip hop and a lot of like pop, and recently it's been something just like this, Coldplay.
Mm-hmm. And what's the one genre you just don't get?
Genre I don't get.
We know you get hip hop, so which one do you like? I can't deal with that.
I mean, some of these pop songs that come out that are just like, you feel like they just manufactured it, like, it's like bubblegum pop that it just blasts for, maybe like a week or two, then it just disappears from the face of the earth. I just feel like, if people haven't put like, if they're not really trying to express something, not really trying to like get something out, something new in the world, it's just, annoying. So it's not necessarily like a genre per se. It's just more of like, the quick stuff.
I think the genre is bubblegum.
Bubblegum.
We're going to call it that.
Yeah.
Podcast recommendation, which is not a JioSaavn podcast, which is not an IVM podcast, but what is your podcast recommendation?
So there's a great podcast on NPR called How I Built This, which is just like, as an entrepreneur, you're always looking for an edge. And sometimes that edge comes from, listening to and understanding what other entrepreneurs have done, how they have addressed, challenges or issues, or just, gone through like some really tough and dark times and then, emerged, with a win. And, it's not going to be from the music industry or tech industry. It's going to be just from, across the board. Yeah. And it just, generally inspires, but then also there may be certain nuggets that you hear there that kind of spark some thinking that you can apply to, what you're doing,
Have you heard Business Wars?
No, I haven't.
You should listen to Business Wars. Business Wars is great. It talks about the most famous rivalries. So you're talking about Netflix versus Blockbuster. You're talking about Pepsi versus Coke. So every season is just a rivalry. So you should check that one out. It's a lot of fun to listen to.
I like the Joe Rogan show too as well.
I mean,
he's just like... He's just so like unfiltered, unabashed. Just he says like it is, and he opens up a side to his guests that I don't think other hosts are able to do.
And if you were asked to whip something up in an instant, it could be food, it could be a cocktail, it could be anything. What can win whip up in an instant?
Oh, guacamole. In a heartbeat. That is like, avocados are the God's gift to mankind in terms of like a superfood.
Yeah.
And if that's the only thing I could whip up, like, and you back me in a corner and just gave me some avocados, that's what I would make and somehow survive. But yeah.
Perfect. And on that note, I think we're going to head off and give you some avocados to make some guacamole. And I think we're all going to do that. Thank you so much, Vin, for being on Advertising is Dead. I think it's important to kind of also tell people what more they can do. We stick to some traditional pieces sometimes. We do never talk about all the stuff which you can do beyond what we really know. And you guys have had an amazing journey. It's been super cool to have you on the show.
Thank you, Varun. It's a pleasure to be here, and I appreciate the time.
Every week comes a show where three people come together to tell you about stuff they like. A movie, a TV show, a book, and other stuff. Tune in every Monday on the IVM Podcast app to IVM Likes. Batman approves this message. Thank you, Batman.
How aware do you think you are of your laws and rights? Do you look up to laws when you are caught up in situations? Do you know what your rights are when you're stuck somewhere bad? Well, here's a show that can help you move an inch closer to being aware of what your rights are. Tune into Know Your Qanoon with me, Amber Rana. This is a podcast meant to answer all your law-related queries. Catch Know Your Qanoon every week on the IVM website or the app or anywhere you get your podcast from.